5. 1 Timothy chapter 5. And just as a reminder, the book of Acts, this is written after the book of Acts. The book of Acts ends around AD 60. That's where chapter 28 ends in the book of Acts. And Paul, at that time, is under arrest. He's under house arrest in Rome. We believe by playing detective, putting together the pieces from some of the letters that are written after that time, that we get the idea that Paul was later released. And he visited various places, including the city of Ephesus, which was one of his main churches. He actually spent 3 years in Ephesus, longer than he was in any other city. And while he's traveling, he leaves Timothy behind in Ephesus. Timothy's kind of like his spiritual son. He's spent 10, 12 years already with the Apostle Paul. And this letter, we believe, is written somewhere around AD 63 with the intent of guiding Timothy on how to be a good pastor, how to fix some of the problems that were going on in the church in Ephesus, which is not a new church. It's been around for a while. It was started by Paul. It was one of the bigger churches. We believe Timothy's in his mid-40s about now. And he would pastor the church for another 30 years, and he would die a martyr's death in AD 97. And so we pick it up in chapter 5, and we're going to do the first 16 verses of chapter 5. And the first 2 verses I'm calling church relationships. He says, verse 1, so this is all about church. This is all about how you do church. So verse 1, do not rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father, younger men as brothers. And so do not rebuke an older man. I think the old King James says, don't rebuke an elder, is the way it'll say in the old King James. And he could be talking about what we would call the office of an elder, or a pastor could be talking about something like that. And he does talk a lot about elders, and he will talk about elders later on in the chapter. But when you look at this verse and the following verse, he uses the word older and younger several times. And we think what he's talking about here is not just somebody who's got the title of an elder, but simply an older man. An older man, somebody that's older than Timothy. And the idea is, how do you treat Timothy? How should you treat somebody that's older than you? A man that's older than you. He says, don't rebuke a man that's older than you. And the word epipleso, the Greek word, means to strike upon, to beat upon, to chastise with words, or to rebuke. It's a pretty strong word. Very, very strong words. You know, give somebody a slap upside the head to whip him into shape, something like that. He says, instead, you should exhort them, parakaleo. That's the word, if those of you who know the Holy Spirit's called the paraclete, the parakletos, the one who is called alongside to help. Some of your translations in John chapter 14 and 16, that he's called the helper. That's how they translate that word. But here it's to call to one side, to exhort, to entreaty, to comfort, or to instruct. That's the idea of exhort. It's a little less intense than rebuke. And so the lesson here is about elder respect, because, and frankly, in America, I don't know if we do too well when it comes to respecting our elders. It seems an elderly gentleman had some serious hearing problems for a number of years. He went to the doctor, and the doctor was able to have him fitted with a set of hearing aids that allowed the gentleman to hear 100% for the first time in years. And the elderly gentleman went back a month later to the doctor, and the doctor said, your hearing's perfect. Your family must be really pleased that you can hear again. And the gentleman said, well, I haven't told my family yet. I just sit around and listen to the conversations, and I've changed my will 3 times. Sorry, I forgot. I said there was no jokes tonight. That's the only joke tonight. That's the only joke tonight. So, okay, anybody want to laugh again just to kind of get? No, okay, no, that's it. Because of Paul's use of the words rebuke and exhort, don't rebuke an elder, but exhort him, he says. You get the idea that Paul's giving Timothy advice on how to confront an older man who's got a problem. Because I think that's what makes sense. Why is he telling him this? How to confront an older man, somebody older than you, Timothy, who has a problem. Confronting doesn't need to come with the abuse of something called a rebuke. Now, sometimes, and I've had discussions with folks at church about this, because they're not sure how to treat their parents, people that are almost my age, and how do they deal with their parents who are not good, who don't do well. And some people are concerned because their idea of respecting your elders means that you never say a cross thing to them, that you never confront them about anything. And we have to treat, as if we have to treat them that they're correct 100% of the time. And that's not what honoring our elders is all about. Paul says that there's room to exhort, to encourage, to nudge, to instruct. The New Living Translation takes this first part of the verse. Never speak harshly to an older man, but appeal to him respectfully as you would to your own father. So there's a place for correcting those who are older than us, but to do it with respect. Now he says also, don't rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father, and younger men as brothers. So while Timothy is to treat men older than himself as he would his father, he's to treat younger guys as brothers. Now, I know a lot about how brothers treat each other because I had 3 sons. So I could talk about in that sense, but I think the point here is that you treat younger people as equals. Now, I have to be honest, I'm not sure that my sons all treat each other as equals. At least they didn't when they were growing up. There's a pecking order, that brothers develop. But I think they treat each other like equals now. And I think the problem that we can face sometimes is that sometimes we can treat people who are younger than us, whether it's in age or in spiritual maturity, and we can treat them like they're inferior, like they're babes, like, you don't know nothing. You're only 5 years old in the Lord. Wait till you're 20 years old in the Lord. Something like that. We can tend to think that way towards people. But he says to Timothy, you treat younger men as brothers. They might seem more immature. They might be new believers, but you treat them as a brother. Treat them as equals. He says, verse 2, treat older women as mothers and younger women as sisters with all purity. Older women as mothers. The Bible says, Exodus 20:12, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. That is one of the 10 commandments. It's one of the big 10, one of the 10 commandments. Paul points out in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 3, that this is the first commandment that comes with a promise. There's bonus points if you do this one. If you honor your parents, then it says you'll live long in the land. You live longer. Now, maybe just because your parents don't take you out. I brought you into this world, I can take you out. Just something like that. Maybe it's kind of like that. I don't know. For some of us, we don't have our mothers around anymore. Lost my mom a couple years ago. And let me just say this. Those of us who've lost our parents, whether it's a mom or a dad, you know what? You're not off the hook on this. Because you should treat the older women in the church like you would treat your mom. And that's not a bad thing. And what's really cool in our church is we've got a couple of older gals in our church. I'm not thinking of any of you here, by the way. I just want to let you know that. Some of you go, yeah, that one, and that one, and that one. No, I'm not. I'm thinking about some of our treasures like Alice. Alice is such a treasure. Isn't she a treasure? Think about Lena. I know that after church sometimes, a whole bunch of gals come up around Lena because they want to talk to Lena, I don't know if you've ever talked with Eleanor. She's about Lena's age. She doesn't look it. She looks about 10 years younger, but we've got gals like that, and you know what? You can keep practicing your skills of how you treat your mother, even if your mother's not around. Because we have the blessing of these older gals in the church. Treat older women as mothers, even the older men. As I lost my dad about 10 years ago, and there's a couple. Oh boy, I'm going to get teared up now. There's a couple of fellows in the church that I just love to pieces because one of them we lost about a month ago, Bill. He even looked like my dad. And so it's okay to practice your skills on the older gals and the older men. And it says, verse 2, to treat younger women as sisters with all purity. And there's a lesson here. I'm going to call it healthy relationships. The word translated purity, hagneia, means purity or sinlessness of life. The word, you can trace the root of the word ultimately to the word hagios, which is the word for holy. But this particular form of it, hagneia, is only used twice, and both times is in 1 Timothy. We've already seen one of them. It's the word that Paul told Timothy, let no one despise your youth, but be an example. He says, Timothy, you be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, and in purity. And here he uses the word again, purity, and he uses it in the terms of with how you treat younger gals. You can draw a straight line from purity to the issue of how you treat people of the opposite sex. Whether you're a guy or a gal, how do you treat people of the opposite sex? Some folks think of church as a social opportunity, a place to meet people, especially of the opposite sex. And we will see them from time to time come in through the doors, and they're on the hunt. I don't know that we've got anybody in the church right now like that, but we've seen them. I understand that, and I need to be a little bit careful here when I talk about this, because we got a few folks in our church who found their future spouse in the church. There's one sitting right back there. There's another one sitting back there. I'm one. I found my wife at church. And hey, what better place to find a spouse than at church? That's not a bad idea. But still, in the light of this verse, we want to work at keeping our relationships pure. Paul says to Timothy, for you, buddy, treat the younger gals as sisters. I like that. I don't know if you ever remember the phrase, we used to use this when, so you'll understand this, since you are my age. You're only 6 months younger than me. That's it. Yeah. How old was I yesterday? I was same age. Yeah, right. Okay. But I remember we used to talk about when you go on a date, and somebody said, well, how was the date? Well, it was like kissing my sister. You ever used that phrase? We used to use that phrase. We used to say, when it was like, I like her, but it's like kissing her was like kissing my sister. Not that I've ever kissed my sisters. Not like that. But that works when a relationship is purely platonic, nothing sexual. And it resonates for me because when I was growing up, I grew up in a family of sisters. And so I can relate to this. I love my sisters. And as a sister, I'd do anything for my sisters. I would do anything for my sisters. I will protect my sisters. I'll die for my sisters. I'll stand in front of a bullet for my sisters. I will tease my sisters. You asked Nikki. I used to tease her something horrible. But there's not a thought of impurity in any of it. And that's how we have to work at treating others of the opposite sex when it comes to church, to have healthy relationships. I think it's a great picture. I think it's a great lesson. How do I treat other people in the church? We want to have a healthy way of treating people. Some people, they're so paranoid about impurity that some men won't even talk to women. I think that's a little bit overboard. You may have a problem, but you got to work on that, and you want to work on it because women deserve respect, and respect means giving them the honor of saying hello to them and treating them like a sister. That's what we want to do. So, verse 3, new section, calling verses 3 through 16 about widows. And first, just a little bit of background about widows. In ancient days, there were two classes of people who were at the very bottom of the social and economic ladder, and that was widows and orphans. Widows and orphans had no means of financial support. The world's economy ran 100% by men in those days. These people had no men in their lives. That's the idea of a widow and of an orphan. No husband, no father. There was no social security. There was no government welfare. Zippo, nada, nothing. Jesus' followers were men and women who had been touched by the grace of God. They were saved when they were worthless. They were loved when they were undeserving. And they had been so impacted by God's love that they knew they needed to pass that kind of grace on to everyone else, even widows and orphans. James summed it up like this: pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. One of James's way of categorizing what a real religion is all about is about showing that kind of God's grace. Is that I care about people that no one else will care about. Is I would care for orphans and widows. Back in the earliest days of the church in Jerusalem, the very early days of the book of Acts, the believers were practicing this way back in the very earliest of days. And one of the ways they would do this would be providing the widows food. In Acts 6:1 it says, "But as the believers rapidly multiplied, there were rumblings of discontent. The Greek-speaking believers complained about the Hebrew-speaking believers, saying that their widows were being discriminated against in the daily distribution of food," because they had a ministry of giving food to the widows. And so, there was some problems there, obviously, and some people thought that their widows weren't being treated as well as the other widows. But the point is, that you don't want to miss, is that they were taking care of the widows. And now in Ephesus, which is, we're now, what I say, we're in AD 63, so we're a good 25 years later. In Ephesus, they're having issues with dealing with the widows. How do we treat these widows? And so Timothy is going to be given some practical suggestions by Paul on how to deal with the issue of the widows. He says, verse 3, "Honor widows who are really widows." I think it's King James, "those who are widows indeed." I like that phrase, widows indeed. I might even let that slip every once in a while tonight. But he says to honor widows. And here, when it comes to honoring widows, he's talking about giving them real help. Physical help, whether it's food or finances. Honoring is not just bowing down or kissing their hand or giving them a hug in church. Honoring the widows is about actually taking care of their needs. He says, honor who? Honor those who are really widows. And we might want to define widows as, any gal who's lost her husband. Bing, you're a widow. And so, bing, the church is going to take care of you because you've lost your husband. And Paul's going to redefine it a little bit about who is qualified to receive this kind of help. He's going to narrow the definition of who the church should be helping. And the more I look at this passage, I wonder if we ought to reevaluate from time to time who we help as a church. Because it does not fit our definition, because we help people in the church. And And it's something that we struggle with. Who do we help? How much do we help? But this is, going through this and tearing this apart today, was again making me realize Paul's idea of who to help is not quite like the way we would have thought it would have been. So honor the widows who are really widows, verse 4. But if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show piety at home and to repay their parents, for this is good and acceptable before God. So a woman's husband dies, and she has other relatives, whether children, grandchildren, I think some translations say nephews or whatever, but it's anybody that's related. Then it's only right and proper for the family to take care of the woman's needs. God thinks family should always help first. We've kind of learned this as our elder board when people ask for help, is that sometimes when we actually have our head on straight and we think about it, we'll say, well, what about your family? Can your family help you? Because that's Paul's point here, is that the family should be helping first. Sometimes people don't want to ask their family for help, and yet in God's eyes, he would rather the family be the first place that people go to for help. He says, for this is good and acceptable before God. Some people are too proud to ask their family for help. And I know this is going to sound weird, but I kind of wonder sometimes if our financial hardships sometimes aren't the very things that God would want to use to repair families and force us to work together and to take care of each other. He says in verse 4, let them first learn to show piety at home. That was kind of stuck out to me today for the first time. The word learn, manthano is the Greek word, to learn. This is something that needs to be learned. It needs to be learned to take care of your family. I think it's kind of important that we as a church don't short circuit what should be happening in the family because we jump in and just want to take care of everybody, Sometimes the embarrassment of asking the family is actually what a person needs to motivate them to take care of their own needs more properly. Because sometimes the family knows a lot better than we do. And we pat people on the back and we say, oh, here, we'll take care of you and everything like that. When maybe they need to have a little bit rougher go at dealing with the family. Verse 5. Now, she who is really a widow and left alone trusts in God and continues in supplications and prayers night and day. She who is really a widow. Now, he's going to give some qualifications about the people the church should be helping. And frankly, I think most of the people that we help as a church don't even come close to falling into this category. And to be honest, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't do this. We had a situation on Sunday where a guy showed up and conveniently showed up after church was over and gave us this story about why he needed help. And I did like I often do. I pull out my wallet and I give him all the money in my wallet. And there was a couple of guys around me and they did the same thing and we, helped the guy. And afterwards I hate it. I feel like I just didn't do it right. I feel like I didn't handle the situation right. And you end up feeling guilty about it. But watch what Paul does when it comes to people. And I'm going to bring some balance to this at the end. But watch who Paul is talking about, who deserves to be helped by the church. She is one who is left alone, and the idea is that this is somebody who has no one else to help her. She doesn't have any other family members to help her. This is someone that the church should put their arm around and help. It says that she trusts in God, and this is not the word I was thinking it would be. I was thinking this is pistuo, the word for to trust or believe or something like that. This is the word elpizo, the word for hope. She's got her hope in God. It's what we would call, and what's kind of, this is throughout this passage, it uses the same tense. It's called the perfect tense in the Greek, which means it's something that happened in the past and it still is happening now. It's not that she just at one point in the past hoped in God. This is someone who has hoped in God and is still hoping in God. She is counting on God. That's who this person is that we would help. And perhaps the idea is that she's hoping in God because there's nobody else to hope in. There's nobody else to help her. It could be that. When you get to verses 11 and 12, you can peek at verses 11 and 12 if you want. It seems that there was some kind of a pledge involved, and I'll describe this more when we get to verses 11 and 12, that for a woman to be put on this list, that she would make a pledge that she was not going to get remarried. And I'll explain this more when we get to verse 11 and 12. But the idea is that she's not trusting in a husband to help her. She's somebody who is trusting in God to help her. Are you with me so far? You've at least following me? You haven't, some of you, I can see the eyelids are drooping. I'm sorry. Should we stop and take a break? You want another cookie? No, that'll put you to sleep right away, right? All the sugar high. So, and it says that she continues in supplications and prayers night and day. Now, this is really fascinating. See, this gal who is really a widow, the widow indeed, she's somebody with a serious prayer life. Somebody with a serious prayer life. And I'd like to suggest that the way we might look at this is that the church is supporting her for the purpose of her prayers. It's like they're paying her to pray for them. They're giving her something to do. This is a woman with a serious prayer life. She continues in supplications and prayers night and day. It's women who... I'd hire somebody like that. I would. I mean, this picture that he's going... And we're just starting to see this picture of this woman that he's talking about the church supporting. Some of it has to do with the fact she has no one else. But you're going to see as he begins to unpack this thing, this isn't a woman who's only coming to the church because she has needs. This is a woman who has a heritage and a history of serving God. It says, verse 6, but she who lives in pleasure is dead while she lives. Now this is in contrast to this woman who continues in supplications and prayer. He says, but she who lives in pleasure is dead while she lives. And so the church's welfare system wasn't meant for people to take it easy and live the good life. That wasn't what this was supposed to be designed for at all. If you are living your life for pleasure, you might, for the pleasure you might receive in this life, you're going down a dead end. She who lives in pleasure is dead. Look at how Moses' faith in the Lord impacted his own life. In Hebrews 11 it says, by faith Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he looked to the reward. Moses saw that the pleasures of sin were passing away, that they weren't going to last. And so he would rather feel the rebuke of following God, having the world rebuke him, than all of the treasures of Egypt. And he knew that in the end he'd get the reward. He'd get a better reward. So in contrast to the widow that Paul is looking for, see, some people are just living their life for pleasure and they want the church to support them. He says, no, that's not who we're talking about. He says, verse 7, and these things command that they may be blameless. I think he wants Timothy to put these things into action so that both the ladies as well as the church might be doing things correctly. I think it's important that we be careful as best as we can to spend the funds that we've been entrusted with as a church to spend it on the right kinds of things. Verse 8, but if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. If anyone does not provide for his own, and the whole principle, again, we've already seen this, is to take care of your family. The word provided is an interesting word in Greek. It's pro-noeo. Noeo means to think about. Pro means before. So to perceive before, to foresee, to think beforehand, to provide for one. It's the person who provides for their family because they're thinking ahead. They're saving up for their family. They're saving up for the needs ahead. That's our responsibility, is to provide for our family. And someone who does not provide for the family says he's like an unbeliever. He has denied the faith. Families need to take care of families. Verse 9, do not let a widow under 60 years old be taken into the number, and not unless she has been the wife of one man, well reported for good works, if she has brought up children, if she has lodged strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, if she has relieved the afflicted, if she has diligently followed every good work. And so he gives some more rules about who should be on this widow list, about who the church should regularly support. She has to be at least 60 years old, at least 60 years old. It says she has to be, unless she's been the wife of one man, it's literally she has to be a one-man woman. A one-man woman. Now, I don't know if you remember the requirements where we talked about rules for an overseer. The overseer was the opposite. He needs to be a one-woman man. A deacon needs to be a one-woman man. And some people think the idea has to do with polygamy, that you're not married to three women. Or some people suggest, I think it's also maybe the idea of divorce and remarriage. But these widows need to be a one-man woman. Verse 3, thirdly, he says she has to have a reputation for good works, and then he gives you a bunch of examples. She has to have brought up children. She's been a mom, and yet, because she's a widow, indeed, she has no surviving children. So she has to have raised children, but then she's lost them. She says has to have lodged strangers or taken care of strangers. That's hospitality. She has a history of washing the saints' feet. Jesus did that at the Last Supper, washing the saints' feet. That's doing servant's work. The idea is that you're not above doing the work of a servant. And she has to have relieved the afflicted. And the idea is the language is of a relief worker, helping those who've gone through difficult times. You know, when tragedies hit, she's out on the front lines, and she's out having done this kind of stuff. And it says diligently followed every good work. So any new idea that comes along, she's one of the first ones to jump in. And maybe also the idea of following close after Jesus' example. So these are the kind of women that the church should support as the widows, indeed. That's not quite what we're thinking of, is it? When we think about the church's welfare roles or in those days, he's saying this is the woman you want to be looking for. That's just kind of like, that's interesting. He says, verse 11, but refuse the younger widows. For when they have begun to grow wanton against Christ, they desire to marry, having condemnation because they have cast off their first faith. Now, he's saying, don't put the younger widows on the list. And probably the idea is that those are under the age of 60, because he's already laid out this age thing. And it says because when they have grown wanton. The idea is that if they're young enough, they're probably going to want to get married again. That don't be surprised if they want to get married again. And he says they desire to marry having condemnation because they have cast off their first faith. Now, I want to suggest that evidently one of the ideas is that there was a pledge, if you're going to join this order of widows, that you would have to pledge not to marry. And if these gals were too young, they'd want to get married, and then they would have to break their pledge to the Lord. It's not wrong to get remarried. It's not wrong. That's not his point. Where the problem is when they make a lifelong pledge to stay single and just serve God the rest of my life, and I've made this public commitment, and then I go, well, maybe I changed my mind. And he says, I don't want women to have to, I don't want these gals to have to face that. That's the problem. There is actually value, believe it or not, in being single. I'm not sure if that applies to too many people in here. But there's actually value in being single. Paul writes in a little different context. He says there's a difference between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cares about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. And she who is married cares about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And this I say for your own profit, that not that I want to put a leash on you, but for what is proper, and that you may serve the Lord without distraction. In the context, he's talking about, should you get married? Should you not get married? And he's trying to make a point that actually being unmarried can be a good thing, because all you're thinking about is serving the Lord. I remember there was a period in my life after my senior year where the love of my life, I dated her for 8 months. Her name was Karen Jo Elving. She broke my heart. Absolutely broke my heart, ripped it out. I knew she was the one because we had dated longer than 3 months. And I had come to the scientific conclusion as a very smart high schooler that if anybody could last with me longer than 3 months, she had to be the one. And we were going into 8 months. I mean, we'd already, as I was a senior in high school, we'd already planning the colors of our bathroom. And, all these kinds of, very serious, important things that we were deciding, And 1 week we went up to Forest Home for a week-long youth conference. And it was started on Sunday afternoon, and it went through Saturday afternoon. So a whole week together. And we get up there, and on Monday night, she breaks up with me. And I have to be with her for the rest of the week. For the rest of the week. And it just ripped my heart out of me. Just absolutely, it was devastating. And so there was a good, how long was it, dear? 2 years? It was at least a good 2 years. I joined the BTTRs, also known as the CIAs. BTTRs, Bachelors Till the Rapture. We had finally, there was a group of us, finally wisened up, and we swore off women. Women were nothing but trouble. Nothing but trouble. I tell you, women are nothing but trouble. And so there was a group, about 4 or 5 of us. Gary Doan was one of those. He was a part of that. Paul Hyrant. And I don't know if Randy Cook was in that group or not, but there was 4 or 5 of us that we all got together. We started meeting regularly and praying together. And God used us big time in my early college years. I mean, we'd go out door to door witnessing. We put on Christian concerts. We'd leading all kinds of people to the Lord. I started working with a high school group. I became in college. I was age 20. I became the senior high youth pastor. My friend Gary became the college pastor. Another friend, Greg Sneller, became the junior high pastor. This was in the height of the Jesus movement. Man, we were serving Jesus. Because who needs women? We were also part of the CIA, Celibates in Action. Celibates in Action. Well, it only took about 6 months before Paul Hyrant got bit. And he found a girlfriend, Karen, and they've been married now for probably, 45 years, something like that, 46 years. And one by one, all my friends fell. And I think I was the last man standing, And then there was this gal, Deborah Lynn McKay, got into my life, and I got bit. And I tried to resist. I broke up as many times as I could with her, But you know what? When you are single, there's value. And don't throw that away. When you're single, there's value because you can focus on Jesus. It's not that being married is bad. Paul says you have to be concerned of the things of the world, which means taking care of your wife, paying rent, buying groceries, that kind of stuff. You have to do that kind of stuff. When you're single, who cares about buying groceries? I'll just drive through McDonald's and who cares? Who cares? I'll have a granola bar for dinner. Who cares? I don't have to worry about anybody else. But when you are single, you can serve the Lord. And so that's the point of these women, is that these women were going to be brought on staff of the church, in a sense, to pray and to intercede. In a sense, they're married to Christ. And God would use these women. And that's the whole point of this whole chapter. And so verse 13, talking about the younger gals, why you don't put the younger gals on the list, verse 13, and besides, they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only not only idle, but gossips and busybodies, saying things which they ought not. And so he gives more reasons why you don't put younger gals on the list. He says, because they learn to be idle. I want to call the lesson here, idle trouble. There's that old adage, idle hands are the devil's workshop. There's kind of some truth to that. And Paul's concern is that the younger gals will be tempted to just get themselves into trouble because their idleness, because who has to do anything? The church covers all my bills, And so I got a little extra time on my hands. It's no problem. And so he said, and I have a feeling that he's saying this because he watched it, and we'll see that in a minute. These gals would start poking their nose into places where they don't belong, and they would stir up trouble. Why? Because they're idle. They don't have anything better to do. And it's not just young widows that have a trouble with idols. We saw this in 2 Thessalonians. Now, dear brothers and sisters, we give you this command in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Stay away from all believers who live idle lives and don't follow the tradition they receive from us. For you know that you ought to imitate us. We were not idle when we were with you. We never accepted food from anyone without paying for it. We worked hard day and night so that we would not be a burden to any of you. We never had the right to ask you to feed us, but we wanted to give you an example to follow. Even while we were with you, we gave you this command. Those unwilling to work will not get to eat. Yet we hear that some of you are living idle lives, refusing to work and meddling in other people's business. So it wasn't just about young women causing trouble. There was a group of people in Thessalonica who just didn't want to work, and they expected the church should take care of me. The world owes me a living. And the problem is that when people don't have enough to do, they get themselves into trouble. Victor Hugo wrote this in Les Miserables. There exists beings who, for the sake of obtaining the key to these enigmas, which are moreover of no consequence whatever to them, spend more money, waste more time, take more trouble than would be required for 10 good actions, and that gratuitously for their own pleasure without receiving any payment for their curiosity than curiosity. Why? For no reason. A pure passion for seeing, knowing, and penetrating into things. A pure itch for talking. And often these secrets once known, these mysteries made public, these enigmas illuminated by the light of day, bring on catastrophes, duels, failures, the ruin of families and broken lives, to the great joy of those who have found out everything without any interest in the matter, and by pure instinct. A sad thing. Certain persons are maliciously, solely through a necessity for talking, their conversation, the chat of the drawing room, gossip of the anteroom, is like those chimneys which consume wood rapidly. They need a great amount of combustibles, and their combustibles are furnished by their neighbors. He's talking about people who just have to gossip, who just want to find stuff out for no good reason. And what a bunch of trouble they cause. It's the same idea. Idleness leads to trouble. Verse 14, therefore I desire that the younger widows marry, bear children, manage the house, give no opportunity to the adversary to speak reproachfully. So he wants the younger, I desire, this is his idea. This is what I think we ought to do. Let the younger widows get married. Help them to stay busy. In today's society, we might add, get a job, something like that. If they've got nothing else to do, they should get a job. And gals, I think this is interesting. He says, Let them marry, bear children, manage the house. The word manage the house, oiko means house. Despoteo, to be a despot, a tyrant, a master. To be the master of a house, to rule a household, to manage the family affairs. He's saying, that's a job to do. Take care of stuff, To give, and says, give no opportunity to the adversary to speak reproachfully. The word opportunity means a place from which a movement or attack is made, a base of operations. When we as believers get into trouble with our idleness, we open the door for Satan to work. We give him a place of operation because I've got nothing better to do with my life. Verse 15, for some have already turned aside after Satan. Some have already turned aside after Satan. Paul isn't talking about hypotheticals. He has spent 11 years with Timothy, and 3 of those were already in Ephesus. He knows the people of Ephesus. He probably has an idea of some of the people he's talking about. And we've even seen it with the Thessalonians, of which Timothy was acquainted with as well. He knows that people can get into trouble with this idleness. And here's the point. Help isn't always helpful. I think that's the overall warning of this passage. For those of us who are quick to empty our pockets at every cry for help. And there are people who will take advantage of us because they know that some of us are quick to pull out our wallets and give money whenever, just to help people because we think that that's what we're doing. That's helping them. When a butterfly or a moth is in its cocoon and struggling to get out, it's important that you let it alone, that you let it struggle. If your kids are doing a science project and they've got a chrysalis that they're in charge of watching, don't help the animal out of its chrysalis. Don't put a little snip in it, thinking that you're helping it, because the moth or the butterfly has to squeeze out of that little hole, to push all the fluid out of their wings, so that when they come out, they can fly. When people have tried to help the butterfly along, to try to help it, they're only hurting it. Parents face the same issue with raising kids. You don't want your child to fall. You don't want them to have any pain. You don't want them to have any trouble. And yes, there's every bit of place for responsible parenting and all like that. I mean, you don't have them play with saw blades and razor blades and knives and stuff like that. No, you don't do stuff like that. But there are what? But on the other hand, you need to let your kids experience pain every once in a while, because that's life, and that's how they grow. That's how they mature. And so, friends, I just want to plant this idea in some of us that some of our ideas of helping people aren't helping at all. We need to be careful about that. And that's right here in this passage, because some have already turned aside to Satan, because we did more than we should have. Verse 16, if any believing man or woman has widows, let them relieve them, and do not let the church be burdened, that it may relieve those who are really widows. So the idea is that family should be meeting the needs of people, not the church. And the church should be able to take care of those who have nowhere else to turn to. So the last issue is this: to help or not to help. As believers, we are faced with the responsibility of learning to listen to the Spirit's leading on whether to help or not to help. Because I have learned over the years, and because of this passage, it is not a slam dunk that you always help. Sometimes you're hurting more when you help. Now, we want to be sure to help when we're supposed to. Proverbs 3:27 says, do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it's in your power to help them. That's That's one of the, and so if you're supposed to be helping them, you better be helping them. This is always the big conviction one for me. Matthew 5:37, then these righteous ones will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will say, I tell you the truth, when you did it to one of the least of these my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. Now, that passage is always one of the most guilt-laden passages in the world when it comes to helping needy people. And I've had homeless people who know this passage and throw this in my face, and so it's a hard thing. But the truth is that when we need to be helping people, I want to be sure that I'm helping them. And yet there's going to be some times when the worst thing we can do is to give someone money. That's what this passage is telling us. That there are some people who will allow Satan a foothold in their lives because we've allowed them to be idle. We've taken away the need in their life when maybe God wants the need to be there so that they would turn things around in their life. And also, just to bring balance, sometimes people need more than money. When Peter and John met the lame man at the beautiful gate at the temple, and the guy was asking for alms, he was asking for money. And Peter said, silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have I give to you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. And so just part of the balance, my friends, is that sometimes money is not the right thing to give. Sometimes there's other things that we can give them as well. And with that, we're done. Let's stand and pray. And so, Lord, these are, I know this is an issue that I wrestle with regularly. And Lord, would you teach us? Would you give us wisdom? Help us to hear your Spirit's guidance in each situation. So, Lord, that we can be truly helpful in a way that you want us to be helpful. Thank you. And Lord, may we all strive to be used by you, for you to work through us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. God bless you.